Welcome back to App Stories. This week's episode is brought to you by Revenue Cat, Pillow, and Collide. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. We had a very fun week last week because, of course, your iOS 16 review came out, which feels honestly like it was a year ago because it
does feel like forever ago already.
It's only been a week, but it feels like a really long time ago. But that's in part because we did a lot of app coverage in the meantime. I got on a roll and started writing a bunch of stories. Then I got sidetracked on some personal stuff, and then I got back to writing again. It's, that's been that kind of year really for us, I suppose. But I thought that today, because we've just been through that we could talk about some of the apps that we're seeing that are really making use of some of the new iOS 16 features, because while I have covered a lot of them, I can't cover them all, unfortunately. And this is one of those things that, first of all, this time of year, Federico, I always feel bad because I'm getting lots and lots and lots of email from developers, and I can't answer it all. I will try to answer.
This is an interesting topic. Why? Why do you feel bad about that?
Because these people, it's not that I don't care about their apps. I just feel like they may feel like they're being ignored. Like I don't care. And some of those, some of those apps, those people who think they've been ignored, they'll just wake up one day and there's a story about their app on Mac Stories. And I didn't tell them because I literally just don't have enough time to deal with it. Others I won't write about. And it's not because I don't like the apps. It's because there's only so much time in a day and week, and I have to draw the line somewhere. And unfortunately, some apps fall by the wayside because writing reviews takes a lot of time. But that's why we have Club Mac Stories with our app debuts, where we cover a lot of the other ones there, and why we have this podcast, because you and I can sit down for an hour and just chat about the apps that we love. And so, yeah, I do feel bad about it this time of year because I do try to stay on top of my email, but it's just not as high a priority as getting the reviews out. So that's why I have to let it go at this time of year.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, as you mentioned, like we gotta be extremely picky with the things that we decide to cover on the site, with the standalone article and the things that are collected in a roundup on the website and the things that are mentioned in Mac Stories Weekly. And the way I see it, I think, being a small team and being busy, the both of us now, me with, the iOS review and working on the making of, and then immediately jump, like as soon as, as we're recording this, it's Friday, I'm finishing up the making of story for Mac Stories Weekly about the iOS review. And as soon as I'm done with that, for me, it's going to be back to review time again. Like I'm going back in, I'm creating a new project in Obsidian, and I'm going to have to figure out iPadOS, which this is totally new to me. Like I'm going back in just as soon as I thought I was done. Isn't that like from The Godfather?
Welcome to my world.
Yeah. You think you're done and they pull you back in.
I'm going to go straight from all these reviews to doing the Mac OS reviews. So it's a lot, but it's fun. I mean, it is fun, but it's like, this is like my public apology to anybody who I didn't respond to, I suppose.
Yes, but we do see your emails, we do see your messages, and as I was saying, like because we are a small team and we gotta be very selective with the things we cover. If you pay attention to Mac Stories, you will see that the standalone articles that John did were about apps that really highlight something specific about the new release of iOS. For example, and we're going to talk about these apps now, but for example, there was the app that had a ton of widgets and a new layout on the iPad. And there was the app that filled a gap in functionality for widgets on the lock screen. Like we try to highlight both the usual stuff, like all the updates that you may have seen on other websites, that you may have heard on other podcasts, but we also like to put our unique spin on these articles, and they have been going really well. All these app reviews that we've done this week, I think, John, you really nailed the format for the site. But like we try to highlight something specific, something new about them, because that's why people, that's what people want to see. They just upgraded their phone, they got a new OS. What's new? What can I do with it? And we're here to serve you that fresh, hot content. you know?
Yes, exactly. And, the thing is, too, that we could do long lists of here are all the apps that have app shortcuts, or here are all the apps that have lock screen widgets, but that doesn't really help. I mean, I think, we're not going to do that, and other people will, and that's fine, but because we're going to take our time doing it, we're only going to pick the ones that are special in some way. And that in itself takes a fair amount of time too. So yeah, it's just part of the whole reason why Mac Stories is a little different, I think.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of these special apps, I thought we would go over some key examples because there's a ton of people who listen to App Stories for apps. I mean, it's right there in the name. They don't necessarily read Mac Stories. Plus, we get to have a conversation, me and you, about these apps, whereas the articles were just from you. And I have some things that I want to share.
This episode of App Stories is sponsored by RevenueCat. If you're a developer, your time should be spent focused on what makes your app special, not hassling with StoreKit. In-app subscriptions are critical to a lot of app success, and getting the infrastructure right is tough. That is, unless you're using RevenueCat. RevenueCat is payments infrastructure simplified. You don't need to worry about managing servers or writing complex back-end code. They take care of all that for you. What's more, RevenueCat is cross-platform, so when you decide to expand beyond iOS to Android or the web, you can do that with RevenueCat. RevenueCat lets you sync status across all of your customers' devices, too. And it has a terrific out-of-the-box analytics package to track your revenue, customer retention, and churn, so you're always on top of your business and how it's performing. RevenueCat integrates in-app purchases data with best-in-class tools, too, and it's trusted by over 9,000 apps, including ones like Notion, StockTwits, and photography app VSCO. Set up RevenueCat today. Integrating with your app will take just hours, not days. So what are you waiting for? Visit RevenueCat.com to learn more today. There's a link in the show notes, too, which will let them know that you came from App Stories. RevenueCat, subscription management built for mobile apps. Our thanks to RevenueCat for their support of the show.
The one I want to start with is Lockflow. So Lockflow, really, you wrote about this really interesting utility that, and we've seen a few similar apps. We picked Lockflow because I thought was the more nicely designed one. This fills a very specific hole in iOS 16, which is there's no Apple-made widget for shortcuts on the lock screen. Shortcuts,
which is a real missed opportunity because you would think it'd just become another toggle inside the settings for a shortcut.
Exactly. Real missed opportunity, but I also wanted to have this sort of meta conversation with you about this. But before that, Lockflow lets you create these launchers for the lock screen. You can either use one of those installer shortcuts. It's basically a shortcut made by the app developers that scans your shortcut library and makes it easy for you to pick one of the shortcuts that you want to install. It basically caches the names of the shortcuts that you have in your Shortcuts app, and later you can pick those from Lockflow. Or you can just go in and do what I did, which is you just type the name of a shortcut you want to run manually. So you say, okay, I want to create a widget. When I tap this widget, it should run this shortcut. And then you can give it a custom icon. And you can choose from 4,000 plus SF symbols. You just search for a symbol, you select it, and you're done. Then you go to the lock screen, you add a Lockflow widget, and whenever you tap that little button with an icon, the Shortcuts app will open and the shortcut will run. Couple of things worth noting here. You cannot pass any input from the lock screen. Lockflow doesn't have support for dynamic variables like location or time of day or clipboard, which, if the developers are listening, could be a good idea for the future. Let me pass some of these global variables as input. Maybe I want to run a shortcut when I'm at a specific place or from my current location.
Yep.
Maybe want to tap on the lock screen widget. That could be an option. But the other thing worth understanding here is that unlike the Apple home screen widgets for shortcuts, these shortcuts will not run in the background. Here, effectively, you are triggering a URL scheme. You are launching the Shortcuts app to run that shortcut, which is an unfortunate limitation, but that's the system we have. in iOS and iPadOS. And
Right.
John, I think you overall you liked LockFlow.
Oh yeah, definitely. I wouldn't have. Yeah, I wouldn't have written about it if I didn't. It's, I think if you have a lot of shortcuts in your library, the way to do it is what you did, which is type in the name. Just make sure that you get it correct, because if you get it wrong, it's not your widget isn't going to work. But the helper shortcut is good, but if you have hundreds of shortcuts, the scrolling of that list, it's just hard to find what you're looking for, and it can bog down a little bit in the UI. But aside from that, I really like this app. I type in the name, and you have SF symbols that you can assign to your shortcuts. So you pick an icon that fits with what you're doing. And I found it's really a handy one to do things like, maybe you want to shuffle a playlist, your favorite playlist, or maybe you want to turn off your bedside lamp at night. Just really simple shortcuts that make sense to have on your lock screen. Now, there are some dedicated apps that we'll talk about that can do things like HomeKit control and music control and things like that. But with this one app, you can kind of just DIY it and do it all yourself, which I kind of like. I mean, it's using the iconography of SF symbols looks really good, and it's very easy to put these together because all you're doing is typing a name, picking a symbol. That's all there is to it.
Mm-hmm. The conversation I wanted to have with you is about this idea of launcher shortcuts. There's been a few of them, right? LockFlow isn't the only one that, specifically about shortcuts. We've seen, there's another one called, I believe, Lock Launcher. Launcher,
yes.
The popular utility Launcher, has been updated with support for lock screen widgets. So you can make launchers for anything, not just shortcuts, but any URL scheme, any app. You can make a custom launcher via the Launcher app. There's another utility called the Lock Screen Contact Widgets, which is really well done. It's really nice. It lets you put custom contacts on the lock screen. You can choose to have basically this it's like speed dial, effectively. Like you can have these shortcuts for a phone call or opening an iMessage or placing a FaceTime call. There's a bunch of these contacts and URL scheme and shortcuts launchers.
Yeah, I was going to say Link Hub is another good one, Federico, because
LinkedIn, right? Yes,
because it can use really nice. Yeah, it can use any URL. So you can use it just to open up the Mac Stories homepage if you want, or you can use a URL scheme that opens a shortcut, or maybe even calls out to an API that can do something.
Yeah, Link Hub, not LinkedIn, Link Hub. I also believe, yes, the name is, I also believe, I want to double check, because when this is the case, I always want to double check this thing. I believe it's made in Italy. Yeah, I mean, judging from the name Cesare Forelli, I want to say it's made in Italy. Yeah,
pretty safe bet.
I mean, sounds Italian to me, and I really like Link Hub because of it's got this shortcuts like design where you have a very compact grid of shortcuts. I mean, it's especially nice on the home screen, obviously, and on the iPad. This is one of the things that now that I'm done with the iOS review, I want to spend some time playing with, because potentially, it won't run shortcuts in the background, and I'm talking about the home screen here, but at least it's got an Excel size widget, and I can create a grid with tons of shortcuts, and yeah, they will open the app, but also, I mean, look at that grid. It's super compact and colorful. And also, the App Store screenshots feature a dog. So, it's a good one.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. More and more studies show that getting a good night's sleep can improve your health and well-being in more ways than one. Pillow is a simple app that can help you become more aware of your sleep patterns so that you can make informed decisions that will help you improve your sleep quality. All you have to do is wear your Apple Watch while you sleep. Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically and give you a full report in the morning. If you want to use Pillow with just an iPhone or an iPad, you can do that too with the press of a button before going to bed. If you have an Apple Watch, you can also get important information about your heart rate trend, variability, heart rate dip, and blood oxygen levels for each sleep session. You can even record sounds like sleep talking, sleep apnea, snoring, and other noises that might be affecting your sleep. If your Apple Watch is a Series 6 or newer, Pillow will also display information about the intensity of those sounds during your sleep session and give you a rating of that exposure. Another valuable aspect of Pillow is helping you make informed decisions about ways you can improve your sleep. Pillow comes with a dedicated section where you can discover trends, get personalized insights, sleep tips, and easily compare your sleep metrics to your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and other metrics. If you want to wind down and relax before going to bed or listen to something throughout the night, Pillow comes with an expanding collection of sleep aid sounds, guided meditations, bedtime stories, and music produced specifically for sleep. If you have the chance to take a nap during the day, you can use Pillow's power nap mode too. Pillow can also wake you up with your iPhone, Apple Watch, or iPad the lightest possible sleep stage using its smart alarm feature. Starting with watchOS 6, Pillow's battery consumption is minimal too. Last but not least, Pillow is very privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data is encrypted and stored on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. You don't need to register or create an account to use Pillow. You can use it anonymously, and it doesn't collect or send your information anywhere else. Pillow is free to download on the App Store and comes with a set of great features that you can use every day for free. If you want to use Pillow's premium features, there's an option to start a 7-day free trial too. Just visit pillow.app to get started today. Again, that URL is pillow.app. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show.
Anyway, I was saying, all these launchers, the reason they exist, obviously, is because Apple hasn't made any, right? But why?
Right.
And I think Apple is fixated on this idea of shortcuts having to be glanceable and not being like these simple launchers, which I think is kind of silly because like it kind of goes against the whole idea of customization. Like, and that's one of my criticisms, I guess, for iOS 16, which is Apple is embracing visual customization, and that's great. But they're maybe not embracing functional customization as much as the visual side. There are some tiny steps, well, not so tiny. There are some steps in the form of like smart lists and smart folders and, keyboard shortcuts, but they could still do a little bit more. And the absence of these launcher widgets, I definitely noticed it there.
Yeah, I did too. And I think it's kind of curious because one of the things that Apple really has promoted with developers in the past, as you know, is deep linking right into different parts of your app, right? I mean, that's been a big push over the years with Apple, but it's not with these lock screen widgets. And I think the very best lock screen widgets, the ones that have really caught my eye, are the ones that let you dig right down, even if they're not launchers necessarily, like strictly launchers, dig right down into the guts of an app. So one that I really want to talk to you about, there are a couple I want to really talk to you about, are both Overcast and Apollo. Okay, because and let me start with Apollo, because Apollo has some really cool widgets available. There's a silly one, of course, because Christian likes to do that kind of thing, and he does a very good job at it. It tells you how far you have scrolled in Apollo. So how many feet you have made it through Reddit, and it'll show you on your lock screen. But that's just a silly one. You can see your karma score. You can go into your inbox. You can go to your favorite subreddit. You can track the performance of your last comment or post. There's a whole bunch of variety here. And what's neat about it is that when you tap on those, it takes you right to that part of the app. So if I favorite my Steam Deck subreddit, I can put that on my lock screen and it'll take me right there. I don't get sidetracked looking at the latest memes on the home page or something.
That sounds interesting. See, that's my problem. Now that you mentioned this, like that's a widget I want to have.
Yes. And Marco's done something similar in the sense that, sure, he's got one widget that all it does is open up Overcast, which it's fine to have that kind of thing. And a lot of people are doing those. But what I really like are two other widgets that he's done, which is one is a recently listened to, which is a rectangular widget that lists right there the podcast.
I love that
right?
one. Yes.
It lists the podcast you've been listening to. And when you tap on it, it opens the app to that podcast episode and starts playing it. You don't have to do anything else. Really nicely done. Also, he's got a circular widget that's a playlist widget that'll drop you directly into your playlist, whether it's, a queue or maybe a latest, or maybe you have one that you've done that's custom. and it immediately starts playing, according to whatever criteria you selected for that podcast right at the start, or picks up where you left off. Really nicely done. Those are two that I like a lot because it's the kind of thing where, you're out and about and you want to listen to a podcast. And I've tried doing this on my watch. It's actually a little awkward on the watch because if the now playing screen has if Overcast is, backgrounded, it's not going to show up on your watch. But with this widget, you can just tap on it and start where you left off. So it's more powerful on the lock screen that way. And I do a lot of errands where I'm out walking around the neighborhood, going to the pharmacy, going to the grocery store, whatever it is. And the first thing I do when I walk out the door is I pop in my AirPods Pro and I hit that widget and I'm listening to whatever, I pick up where I left off from the last errand.
Yeah, that you're giving me some ideas. This is, I mentioned this in my review. This is my problem. I have too many ideas and I hear from my friends and coworkers, in this case, interesting ideas, but there's not enough space for them on the lock screen.
You've only got 4 or 5, depending on what sizes you use. Or actually, it could be 3 to 5, right? If you use 2 rectangular ones.
Yeah, and I'm surprised that they didn't add support for stacks, like on the home screen, or even better, some kind of pagination. Let me swipe through tiny pages of widgets below the clock, I don't know, some way to have more.
A horizontal scrolling system, I think I'd like better than having stacks. That could work. Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, yes, you only have somewhere between 3 and 5 options here. The only way to get around that is to make a lot of lock screens. And then you have to either switch them manually, which, as you pointed out in your review, is a little cumbersome at the moment. I mean, there's not like a handy gesture to do it. You have to, long press and then kind of do the swiping, then tap again. It's a little bit involved. Or you can set up a bunch of focus modes tied to those lock screens and have it done on some sort of automated system using personal automations or something like that, or shortcuts. And that's good, but that gets out of hand very quickly. And one of the things I've been exploring again is focus modes, but I really don't want to be that guy who has 30 focus modes. I want to have...
Oh, you don't?
No, I don't, because I mean, it's I have these standard modes in my life. It's daytime mode is pretty much just one mode. It's I'm either working or I'm maybe running some errands or having a meal or something. And I have evening or weekend mode. I don't feel like I need to slice my life up into so many different slivers that I never know, well, is it John's reading mode time, or is it TV mode time, or is TV mode time different than movie mode time? And should they, right?
It's like I'm hearing myself. Yes.
Right. And if it's reading time, is it book reading time, or is it blog reading time, or is it Reddit reading time, or should those things be combined? Should they be separate? If I separate them, then I can do more Apollo widgets. But if I, it becomes a mess very quickly. So I don't think that focus modes and separate lock screens is a very good solution. It works to a point, but very quickly I think it gets out of hand.
Well, now that you mentioned, this is totally unrelated. I have the same problem, by the way, with focus modes. Too much granularity will really, it always becomes a problem.
Yeah, they lose their utility, I think.
But now that you mention it, totally unrelated, but you mentioned, John's time of day.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw this. I don't think you did because you were too busy with personal stuff today. But let me blow your mind here. In a future version of Marvis, the Apple Music client, you will get ready for this. You will be able you will have these new filters that will let you show or hide specific sections in the homepage of Marvis based on time of day.
Oh, interesting.
So
Marvis is building its own automation system. It's great.
So you could have I know that you like your playlists in the morning, for example, but maybe you want to see something else in the evening when you're cooking dinner or something. You can do that. So anyway, this is
interesting.
This is an iOS 16 episode, and we're talking about iOS 16.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Collide. Collide is an endpoint security solution that uses the most powerful, untapped resource in all of IT, its end users. Old school device management tools like MDMs force disruptive agents onto employees' devices that can slow performance and treat privacy as an afterthought. Collide does things differently. Instead of forcing change on users, Collide notifies your team via Slack when their devices are insecure and gives them step-by-step instructions on how to solve the problem. By reaching out to employees via friendly Slack messages and educating them about company policies, Collide can help you build a culture in which everyone contributes to security because everyone understands how and why to do it. For IT admins, Collide provides a single dashboard that lets you monitor the security of your entire fleet, whether you're running Macs, Windows, or Linux machines. That visibility makes it easy to prove compliance to your auditors, customers, and leadership. You can meet your compliance goals by putting your users first. Visit collide.com/appstories to find out how. If you follow that link, they'll hook you up with a goodie bag, including a t-shirt, just for activating a free trial. That's KOLIDE.com/appstories. Our thanks to Collide for their support of the show.
We cannot not mention Widgetsmith, right? We got to mention Widgetsmith.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And Widgetsmith, so obviously underscore David Smith's excellent utility for home screen widgets that really exploded in popularity 2 years ago, thanks to the home screen aesthetic trend, which, by the way, is there going to be a repeat of that with the lock screen? I don't know. I haven't seen it so far.
I haven't really either. It's interesting that hasn't taken off. It may take a while. I mean, you got to remember that Widgetsmith, it took a little while for that. There was a little bit of a slow burn, I think, with...
It wasn't the first week, no?
Are you sure? I thought he was on vacation with his family for like Thanksgiving or something when that app took off for some reason.
No, it wasn't that before Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, now
now we have to go look back at the history of all this. I should look at the some of these articles that I linked to in the story.
Let's see. No, maybe you are right. It was mid-October. It was toward the end of September for sure. So maybe at least a couple of weeks after that. Anyway, we'll see. But what I can tell you, an interesting data point. So Sylvia, she teaches dance to, she's got a class of kids, teenagers. Mm-hmm. And she came back to me yesterday and she said, the kids told me that iOS 16 is ugly. So, spoken from the kids. And the kids, some teenagers, what I can tell you, the data point is that some teenagers in Italy find iOS 16 ugly. So
I talked to two people today who told me that they can't stand updating their iPhones because something invariably changes on their home screen and they don't know how to fix it. And that's, that's the reality of most people.
So there you go. Well, we'll see. Anyway, Widgetsmith. Obviously, David Smith is back with a lock screen update for Widgetsmith. And as I wrote in my review, personally, I feel like I prefer Widgetsmith on the lock screen than the home screen because the lock screen is perfect for the types of glanceable, quick, informative widgets that Widgetsmith lets you design. And even better, like you got all the tools from 2 years ago, right? So you can create widgets for dates, calendars, time zones, weather, reminders. But even better now, you have a new design inside Widgetsmith to create these widgets. It's very intuitive and I really like it. You got your home screen widgets and your lock screen widgets. They are two separate sections and everything is very nicely done. You can choose to make a text widget, which is the one above the clock, or a circular widget or a rectangular one. And you have all these new tools inside Widgetsmith itself. Like, for example, you have a mini reminders tool or basically David Smith also built calzones, his excellent time zone comparison app inside Widgetsmith now. So that's really cool.
Yeah, he basically has a weather app in here too. I mean, he had his
and there's a weather app, yes.
And because that's one of the things he's done with Widgetsmith is tied more of these widgets that you can build to actual views, so that when you tap into something like your step counting, for instance, you actually see a more detailed report about your step counts.
Yeah. And what I also love here, which is another trend that I want to, so sort of one of these macro trends that we are observing in this very first week of iOS 16, photo widgets. I think Apple maybe underestimated the interest in these widgets. For an obvious reason. If you want to put a photo in a widget on the lock screen, it's going to be a monochrome picture. Like it's going to be black and white. It's going to be actually it's going to be a grayscale photo, right?
Yeah, and to even be recognizable, it has to be pretty high contrast.
And it's got to be pretty high contrast, and and it's going to be tiny. I mean, if you put it in, in a circular widget or even in a rectangular widget, it's going to be a tiny photo. But in Widgetsmith, David has done a bunch of interesting things. One of them is, for example, it recognizes human subjects in a photo, and it lets you crop them out using the new image segmentation technology of iOS 16. So if you want to put a picture of a loved one in a widget on the lock screen, but as you mentioned, like maybe it's not too high contrast, right there in Widgetsmith, you can recognize the people in the photo and you can cut them out. And basically, you're going to make a PNG widget. It's going to be black and white, sure, but still you're going to see a picture of your spouse or a picture of your kids on the lock screen as a widget, and that's cute. Or maybe maybe you want to have your kids as the wallpaper, but your dog as a widget. Well, now you can do that as well. But there are other implementations.
Right. And by using the subject isolation like that, it does make the presentation a little nicer in the widget as well.
Exactly. But we've also seen so far some other implementations of this feature. Obviously, we mentioned the contact widgets utility. That's one of them. You can see your profile pictures for people as contact launchers on the lock screen. But there's two more that I want to point out. One of them, I can only point out one of them because the other one was LockPod, but I believe it's still in beta.
It's still beta, yeah.
Yeah, but I can mention Soar. So Soar, the Apple Music client, now has widgets for the lock screen that lets you launch. They let you launch playlists, right? Those widgets that let you open playlists inside of Soar, and the artwork of those playlists, you can see it as a monochrome grayscale image on the lock screen. I'm not sure how much it helps when it's that small, but still, I don't believe Apple has done any photo-based widgets. They prefer text or symbols, but developers are doing it.
Yeah, they are. And, Federico, before we kind of wrap up for the day, I do want to mention two more. And I think we're going to have to, talk about apps again sometime soon because there's a lot more going here. We haven't talked at all about app shortcuts or about shared with you apps. And we've been keeping our eye on those as well. But I wanted to mention, first of all, MusicBox, because MusicBox is Marcos Tanaka's app that lets you save Apple Music tracks, albums and songs for later. And the widget that I love, the lock screen widget that I love, is a very simple circular one that you tap it launches the app, and it starts listening. So you can, using Shazam Kit, so you can be out and about, tap once, and it'll recognize the song, and you can add it to your list. So if you're out for a meal or something and hear something playing that you like at a restaurant and you've never heard it before, this is really easy and faster than using Shazam in the control center. So there's that, which I thought was really clever because it's really going deep into the functionality of that app, which would take several taps to get to otherwise. And the other is Things, because Things has done something that Reminders hasn't. Sure, it has the ability to show you three items, three of your tasks from a list, but it also has the ability to add a task. And it also has the ability to track your progress with you pick the list, and it has an outline around the circular widget that shows the completion of, the percentage completion of your tasks for that day, for instance.
That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. Yeah.
It's really nice. I mean, a lot of people have done task-based widgets, but these are the ones that I like the best so far that I've seen. And that's Things. So that's really a great one to check out.
I'll mention one more. Speaking of task managers, I want to point out the Todoist widgets, because Todoist widgets, there are not that many of them. I would like them to build more types of widgets, but they also have a task creation widget. And the reason why I want to mention it is they applied the same technology that they used 2 years ago for their home screen widgets to the lock screen ones. Basically, you can pre-fill the information that you want to have by default when creating a new task. Meaning, you can create a lock screen widget for Todoist to create a new task, but you can pre-fill the information for a project, a section, a tag, notes, like all the metadata fields for tasks you can pre-fill in these widgets. And you can create multiple of these widgets. So for example, you could have a plus button on the left that creates a task in your personal project, and you can have a plus button on the right side of the lock screen that creates a task for work stuff, like for example. The downside here is that those two buttons are going to look the same because Todoist does not let you customize symbols. So that's the downside, and one aspect that I would like to see developers, in general, consider now, consider having support for SF symbols as a way to differentiate widgets on the lock screen, especially if you're going to create multiple of the same type.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think creating multiple of the same type is important. I've seen apps that don't do that, but I think it, especially if you have the kind of app where there are different sets of data, like you're talking about with task management, where you have multiple projects, it makes a lot of sense to allow users to create multiple widgets and add them to their home screen if they want. All right, Federico, that's good conversation for today. I'm going to let you go for the weekend, Federico. We need to take it easy, I think. We need a little R&R to recover. I want to thank our 3 sponsors for this episode, Revenue Cat, Pillow, and Collide. You can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you later, Federico.
Ciao, John.